Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Into the Cypher State, the premier public broadcast of Galactica Network. This week, we're going to be chatting with our incredible lineup of guests about the most pressing matters affecting the Web3 space and beyond. So make sure you stick around. We will be opening the floor to listeners for your opinions and hot takes during the stream. We'll be doing that slightly later, after we've got our takes from the, our main takes from the panel up here right now. My handle is citizen42.gala. But you can call me Dave. Today I'm joined by my regular co-host Cosmos Os and some very special guests. So let's introduce everyone. We'll get on with the show. Let's start with Defund, who's behind the profile, and just give us a little introduction.
How's it going? My name is John from Defund, part of the team they're building, and Defund's a blockchain for building financial products. Short, simple.
Fantastic, man. Love it, love it. We also have on the panel today Crypto Rich. So please, my friend, just give yourself a little introduction. Thank you.
Rich, you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, hi. I run a channel under the name of Crypto Rich. I'm based in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I've been running a cryptocurrency YouTube channel and also an Odyssey and Rumble since April 2017. And over the last few years or so, as life has got far too interesting, I also cover a lot of political and current affairs issues as well as crypto. And I know Cosmos Hoss because we encountered each other in the Cosmos ecosystem. So thank you so much for having me on.
That's absolutely fantastic, Rich. We've had lots of friends of us on lately over the last couple of weeks, and almost all of them have had fantastic takes and very unique perspectives. So I'm looking forward to your take, man. Kamoka, I assume we are a part of Nolus?
Yes, sir. So yeah, my name is Kamen. I actually am the CEO of a money market that launched probably like 4 hours ago. We actually produced our first blocks called Nolus. It's a layer 1 upchain built with Cosmos SDK. We're trying to really go and solve some inefficiencies on crypto markets by creating a very independent, non-custodial Web3 financial money market. Very short.
Short and sweet. I'm enjoying it. Don't worry. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at everyone's protocols. I would actually recommend that everyone who's listening right now, if you just give everyone who's up on the panel a click, make sure you follow their profiles and take a look at what they've got. Most of the people up here who we have up here are genuinely very interesting and definitely worth your time to take a look at. Okay, guys. So we have a few topics. Of course, we've put in the title today, the debt ceiling, which is something that is obviously very relevant at the moment and currently unresolved. We also have CBDCs in the form of, I believe it's Ripple, XRP Ripple, who are working with the Bank of England and others in order to provide some CBDC infrastructure and see if we can get CBDCs onto like some sort of bridge between the CBDC world and the blockchain world. So that'll be a fun one, of course. Sorry, and you know what? The one person I haven't actually introduced yet, my wonderful co-host. Please, Cosmos Hoss, if you could just give yourself a quick intro before we start on the first topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Cosmos Hoss here, back for another. Basically, my role, if you guys don't know me, is I just am a crypto maxi soldier, and I primarily cover Cosmos. My role is to basically help each chain, each protocol, the community, outreach, education. Love doing these spaces and just collaborating and talking and learning and growing. And that's kind of my little too long did not read little analysis. But to throw it over to Rich, like it's invited him. We go kind of way back in the space, and I thought he would be a perfect candidate along with my other, the invitees, and just excited to kind of get it going today and talk about some random topics about crypto.
As always, man, complete pleasure. Right now, we've got the whole team together. Fantastic, and we'll get going. So I think what we can do actually, since we can just stall the debt ceiling and CBDCs for a second, if you'd like. Before we started the space, we were having a bit of a chat between the speakers up here. We were discussing media bias. If we can avoid any inflammatory language and anything else, because I know it's a hot topic and very spicy, but if we can avoid that, if you'd like to give us your takes on media bias, please, Rich. I think it was Rich and
Yeah,
Van den
I
Hos.
was gonna say no. I'll just kind of like give like the intro about it, but like the things that I don't understand and comprehend, just this like bias towards people not being able to express themselves with a different vantage point. You can't question anything, and I don't know when this like changed. It seems like over the last decade, but even during like the virus and everything, you couldn't question anything. Like, so, you use these outlets, like how I love doing these outlets, like, and I try not to get political and do any of that stuff because I don't want to have to deal with consequences just for expressing the way maybe I feel or whatever, just questions about things. And it's kind of really unfortunate when those out there can't speak truly freely on these outlets to just communicate with other people. There's a lot of people that had a lot of questions about a lot of things, and they're not allowed to. They just have to sit there and shut up. And it's just like, why? It doesn't make any sense. You claim that you're, it's all about freedom and things like that, and you're not even invoking violence or anything. You just want to know questions. You couldn't even do what you thought was best for your own health, and you got antagonized, you got bullied. You go to work, and people at work are bullying you. It's like, my job, for example, not once in my life have I ever was asked, like, did you get the flu shot? Did you get this shot? Did you do this medically? And then it was just like socially, it was acceptable after that happened. And, people weren't using any facts or any science, and they were claiming all this stuff, including people at the very top of the chain saying like these viruses exist because people don't get vaccinated. And it's like, no, it's the same premise with the flu shot. Like, you get the vaccine, and maybe it helps with the side effects and things, but it doesn't just like eliminate it. It'd be nice. Like, I would love that. Like, there was no viruses ever, and that was a thing, but that's not the truth. And it's really sad. And then, like, we're kind of having like a topic about like policies and political. It kind of all ties into crypto because, like, right now, sadly, this space is kind of getting halted in certain geographical regions because of just like pure nonsense that makes no sense. And hopefully that all gets remedied. And what is great about tech is that there's really no borders. So I always say another man's loss is another man's gain. If one country doesn't want to play ball, like, another one will see that as an opportunity and go for it. And then that basically promotes like a competitive landscape for everyone. It's like you either get on board or you get like lost behind. And we're seeing it in the States now. Some states are kind of, they're all for crypto, then some of them aren't. And, it's slowly but surely, it's going to get there. It's going to get to the push to the finish line. But yeah, like, I think this is probably a good way to lead it into like just kind of talking about it and trying to keep it, I guess PG or whatnot. But it is sad. Like, I just see things. I'm like an observer in life. Like, a lot of times when I'm out and about and just listen to conversations, even with family, or kind of just like eavesdropping, and like I hear and see things, and like it's just crazy how one thing is so acceptable, but you can't do anything to question that or bring up any sort of factual numbers, and it's just like you get bullied. And or like Rich has dealt with getting videos deleted and stuff. But if he had that same point of view on the other side, it would be completely acceptable. So that's kind of my take about everything.
I mean, it's quite frustrating. Like, I've personally, I find it from, I'm a very, very much a centrist, right? I'm very much a center, dead down the middle, some people say to me, because regardless, the point is that it's extremely frustrating from my point of view, seeing both sides being either silenced or amplified based on just completely arbitrary metrics and algorithms, and seeing people just marginalized by the other side and completely unable to actually have proper discourse. It's disappointing, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
Speaking on what you were
please,
saying about algorithms, it is very interesting, right? So I hope Twitter does become this open forum type of area, similar to a Reddit what it used to be. But I like to call myself apolitical because I really don't care about drama, right? But I do care about what's actually happening in the country and around the world, right? I do think that algorithms are feeding you what you interact with the most, whether that's something you agree with or something that you strongly disagree with. It's something that they're going to constantly push you towards, and it's going to lead you to a stronger bias in any direction, right? So you could be left of the aisle and you really dislike, say Donald Trump. They're going to keep on pushing you things that he did wrong because it catches your attention, it catches a reaction. And the same thing on the right side, if you really dislike Joe Biden, they're going to feed you the stuff that you really dislike so that they can get you to comment and interact with it. So for me, I think the big reason for this large media bias is polarizing people, but polarizing algorithms. They're really just driving people to what drives the most engagement and interaction. So at the end of the day, they could sell more ads to those people. That's pretty much how it works.
Yeah, John, I totally agree with that. I mean, why do you think they had whatever it's called, the townhouse or town meeting? I don't even know what it's called, but it was on CNN interviewing Trump. It's because of the ratings. Like, you can look at numbers. I'm a numbers guy, so like I agree the same way. I don't get really into the politics that much, but I'm just a number guy. And if you're trying to have an open debate with me about any sort of policies or what's going on in the world, you better bring numbers and statistics, or else I just don't want to hear it. Like, I'm not about like, facts don't care about feelings. That's just the way life is. It never will and never has been, and you can't change that. So unless you actually want to bring facts and numbers and statistics, like, I just don't even want to hear it anymore. And all that other stuff is just noise to me. But no, I totally agree with that. Like, it's just, yeah, it's insane, man. Like, I don't know how you do anything anymore without getting ridiculed.
Well, and when you're a polarizing either figure in a polarizing industry, you're going to have flack no matter what you do, right? So it's a matter of navigating the flack and deciding, all right, can I actually get people to rally behind me? And if not, do you keep on screaming into the void, or do you move on to something else, right? I do see, the blockchain industry and cryptocurrencies as a whole, it's a very polarizing industry that's still, it's getting more traction in terms of eyes. I'm sure most people at this point have heard of what a Bitcoin is, and then Doge and Shiba and all these, things that really don't mean too much in the long run. Though Bitcoin is obviously going to be a solid store of value. I'll talk more about that when we go into the debt ceiling and CBDCs later. But the majority of the industry just isn't even a blip on the average person's map. They don't even understand anything outside what the biggest topics are. So it's going to be interesting to see how polarizing of a topic crypto becomes in the next 5-10 years. I personally hope it becomes a boring topic and it becomes more like the stock market and foreign exchange markets and commodities markets, so that there's just actual trading discourse versus political discourse on it.
And then, like, I guess if I had to ask you a question, just like in general, just like a random question, since we're talking about media, I guess everyone can answer this question, is like, do you think in like the next 10 years, people are even going to watch like corporate news?
I think corporate news is going to move onto social media. I think that's actually, I think that's what Elon is actually pivoting towards. It kind of, reading the tea leaves here, right? It kind of seems obvious that he's pushing, these big media personalities onto the Twitter platform, which he's probably going to rename it to X. And then you're probably going to be able to find essentially live TV broadcasts directly through Twitter, with the eventual transition to Twitter or X, whatever you're going to call it, fully. So you're going to see the biggest names having their opinion pieces portrayed directly on social media, because going back to those algorithms, why wouldn't you? They're going to feed your content to a much more relevant audience immediately versus making them switch to a channel and hoping it's on at the right time. So it's going to be a much larger broadcasting of pivotal voices and polarizing voices than ever before, as more and more people move onto the social platforms to tell people their opinions and facts.
Yeah, I can see that happening, to be honest. Sorry, Nolus, if you have an opinion, please.
Yeah, here maybe it's important to also mention that everything that goes into news is not so much what people desire, but what is pushed to them. So I believe corporate news will stay because this is where big money is. Once you have big money moving the force, it would always stay. I agree totally that it would change its color. So basically going to Twitter, going more to social media compared to TV and so on and so forth. But ultimately, these news will stay because these news are important not only to the majority of people, but also to the big money. And as long as you push more and more over to the consumer, it would be there.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think
Can I
always keep
come in here?
Yeah, please, Rich.
Address some of the points. Okay, so one whether something's political or non-political. I understand politics to be about the exercise of power. And while I may want to live a non-political life, there are changes going on in the world right now, in the UK, in the US, in Europe, wherever, that have an impact on my day-to-day existence. Therefore, I have no, if I want to resist those changes or be involved in those changes, then it means I got to be political. The fact that my videos have been deleted, and what I didn't mention earlier is I've had over 160 videos deleted by YouTube, and both my YouTube channels are shadow banned. Well, that pushes me into the political sphere, because the fact that I'm actually going to be resisting that and standing up for free speech, well, that's a political act. And that these corporations and these governments, because we have the Restrict Act in the US being, it's not law yet, but it's going through the stages. We've got the Online Safety Bill in the UK. We've got similar legislation in Europe and in Ireland, which will take away our rights to express ourselves, to express ideas, to engage freely. So I'm compelled to take action, or not. I don't have to take any action, and then those changes will, just come about, and that they'll, I'll lose my freedom of speech. So that's one point. The other thing, in terms of what's happening in the world and why corporates are doing this, here's how. If I can say, I'm going to say how I look at it. Right. One of the ways I look at it is through fractals. So fractals, for those who don't know, are self-repeating patterns, and they show up in human behavior and in human discourse. So, for example, I have a particular politics. I would have described myself as very left-wing, but I'm more libertarian than anything. And I don't even know if left-wing, right-wing applies anymore in this environment. But I'm for people being free to organize, decentralized structures, free to express themselves. I would say that's my politics. Now, I can impact the people around me with that particular point of view, with that perspective. But if I were to become, say, I don't know, the mayor of the town that I live, of the city that I live in, then that political perspective I have would be played out at a much larger scale. And then if I were to become the prime minister, the political perspective that I have would play out over an even larger scale. So we have this self-repeating pattern. And then what I do as a social worker, I get a phone call from a school. They say, look, we're worried about these kids. And then what I got to do is I got to go investigate what's happening in that child's household. What are the conversations? What are the interactions between the different agents, between the mum and the dad, the kids with each other, the kids with their parents? What does the school say? What does the school nurse say? What does the doctor say? The health visitor? What do the police say? Now, if I take that model and I scale it right up to what's going on in the world. So yes, corporates do, funnel us, and algorithms get us, directed in a particular way. But why is that happening, and who's doing that?
It's happening for profit. It's happening for profit. I don't want to cut you off, but it is happening for profit.
No, I think it's worse. I actually think it's worse. There is the profit element, but you can still make profit from allowing self-expression. The mainstream media are losing viewers like crazy. And you just look at the declining views that Fox have had since they lost Tucker. Tucker's going to make a lot of money should he find himself broadcasting somewhere else. He and whatever that organization will be. He's going to make a lot of money there. Censorship serves the interests of the powerful. Censorship doesn't promote an economy that thrives. You just have to look at the sort of business environment in countries where there's a lot of censorship and compare it to the business environment in countries where there's very little censorship, relatively. You know, North Korea doesn't have a thriving market economy, I imagine. China has, but then China's so large, and even then there are restrictions. Saudi Arabia. Censorship serves the interests of the powerful because they have the capacity to shut down the voices of those that have less power. Then why are they doing that? What's the discourse? What's the conversation that they're out to promote? And then, Hoss, you spoke earlier about a certain medical intervention. We're on Twitter, we can talk freely, but this might go on YouTube or something, so I will be careful, right? But a certain medical intervention. During that period, the messaging from the government was this: we will tell you where you can go. You need to stay indoors. We'll tell you when you can go out, who you can mix with. We will tell you what you can wear, and we will do this for your own good. Do you know who else says that? Perpetrators of domestic abuse. The families that I work with, where it's usually the man beats up on the mother, I will tell you when you can go out and who you can see and what you can wear, and I'm doing it for your own good. So we have that conversation. Oh, and don't speak unless I tell you to. So we have that conversation at a much, much larger fractal scale playing out.
That's an incredible analogy, Rich. It really is. Guys, I just want to reset a touch here, just because I would like everyone who is listening right now, if you could just jump down and give us a like and a retweet on this space. We're going to be discussing quite a few topics today. There's going to be a lot of information and a lot of education. So if you get the space out to as many people as you can, I'd really appreciate it. So we get a few more likes and a few more retweets on this space. That'd be awesome. So yeah, Rich, I mean, I couldn't really agree much more. It's clearly not about profit. It is about power dynamics. We have, this is one of the reasons why Galactica is doing what it's doing. So for anyone who doesn't know, we are Galactica Network. We're an L1 blockchain, which is currently in development. We're just releasing our devnets and testnets. We're just going into that phase at the moment. So if you'd like to give us a bit of a like and a retweet, that'd be awesome as well. But the reason I bring us up is because we are attempting to bring the social capital on chain. So currently we have financial capital on chain, which is money. We are trying to bring social capital on chain, which is your reputation. So we end up with more societal aspects on. So we currently have this money being transferred on chain, which is absolutely wonderful. It's the freedom and the new financial rails for everyone. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world or what position you're in, how much power you have. You have this incredible decentralized set of financial rails that you can use to transact with anyone else in the world. And that is a beautiful sentiment. And we want to transfer that sentiment to the social side of things, so you can have yourself represented on chain and transfer your social capital on chain in a free and inclusive manner. So yeah, that's something that we are very, very passionate about in getting real people transacting with their reputation on chain. So yeah, well, Nolus or Defund, do you have any particular further take on this one?
You know, I do think I'm a fan of follow the money, right? Who's profiting where? That's just who I am as a person. There's always somebody making money off of something, right? If you want to go back to, you know, the whole medical crisis we had, there was a lot of people pushing those products that were government sponsored. If you want to go to any war that we've had, they're all pushed by private corporations. They're government sponsored. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, in the current in the current political atmosphere, and honestly for the last probably couple hundred years, really right after the founding fathers of the United States, and politically, internationally, it's government, it's corporate funded across the board. And that's just the nature of things, because these corporations, they have a lot of cash, and it's really hard to say no. It's easily corruptible when they throw a big check at you. So building on that, I do think, and actually going back to what we were saying before about the media bias, I do think that hopefully Twitter goes down a model. I know Elon's brought it up a couple of times about open sourcing the code. I hope it turns to a decentral model where, yeah, Twitter can run the main front end, but it's an open source back end, and then people can pop up their own nodes or whatever you want to call them to run the same social platform that all submits to the same place, so that there is no one central location where censorship is really a thing, right? Assuming that the blockchain decentralized model is implemented into a social media place that does have enough traction, we might actually get to a place where censorship is a lot less prevalent, and might get some more free speech on an international scale.
Yeah, I don't see the problem in that. You know, like, what's the issue if you just like disagree with someone? Just like block them, or don't see what they say. Like, I don't care what other people say, but I'm like what Rich was saying earlier. I kind of just like agree with him about like the kind of, I think majority of people in crypto are probably more towards like the libertarian approach. Like, they might side, right or left because they have to in the States, because there's really no other option, sadly. But I'm the same way. Like, I'm just like the ultimate freedom maxi. Like, I say it jokingly, but my next door neighbor can be like an axe murderer, and I wouldn't even know, because I just like mind my own business. They seem like good people. I say hi to them, but not that I'm promoting that, but I just like, I think people should be free to kind of basically do, for the most part, whatever they want. There's got to be some limitations. Like, you can't do something really bad, but yeah, I'm like one of those people that I feel like people should be able to pretty much do whatever they want, and I think government really isn't intended to like oversee that perspective of what you can wear, what you can say, where you can travel to, and things like that. I think it was meant for other things, like being safe and making people feel safe about where they live at. And you have to have some sort of law and order, obviously, but I think nowadays it's just so drastic on things, and there's just too much. And I think any step in the direction of impinging on people's freedom of speech is just really bad. Like, overall, it's just bad, regardless of like your political perspective. And even if the person's being a jerk or an ass, like, it doesn't matter. Like, let them be, like, as long as they're not trying to like start a riot or do anything really harmful. What's the problem with when someone says something that you totally disagree with? Just ignore them or move on. Like, there's so much to do in this world, especially nowadays. And it's sad that people that are like-minded are kind of just shut like the role. It's almost like nowadays, like, adults need to just shut up. It's like, that's kind of the way it goes now. Like, adults, you guys shut up. It's like, especially my era, like, it seems like now we grew up. Like, I'm the type, like, full disclosure, I'm 37, so I grew up with both perspectives. Like, when I was a kid, we didn't have technology, and if we did, it was very crappy, and no one stayed inside the house and used the computer. No one did social media. All that stuff came out when I got older. So I still remember the old school way of life, and now it's so drastic, man. It's insanity. You literally can't have a debate with like most people nowadays without them putting you in some sort of category and calling you, if you vote this way, you're this type of person. It's like, no, maybe I voted because there's more than just one. There's one objective. Like, it's like, I guess the media has done such a good job of just brainwashing people to think the only thing that matters is like socially constructed stuff and not actual real topics that we're kind of discussing. So
I think that I'm not sure it's the media's fault. I mean, obviously, there is some blame to lay, but the media is just like almost all of these institutions are just derivatives of society itself, of society at large. I think one of the main problems is that people have got lazy, and when people get lazy, they end up doing things like they end up going into one extreme or the other. No nuance, no gray. and that's it's a very sad thing to see. So like you were saying, there's just absolutely no way to have proper discourse because no one wants to listen. Everyone wants to be like, and everyone's really used to being in these echo chambers now because they've been put in these echo chambers by algorithms, by politics, by all sorts of things. Sorry, Crypto Rich.
By power plays, by the people that own the media companies in the background, like BlackRock and Vanguard, and like those that own BlackRock and Vanguard that have a say. There's one of the broadsheet newspapers in the UK called The Guardian. It used to be sort of like left and centre and for peace and things like that, right? I think it's just awful. It's awful, awful, awful. There was an article in The Guardian about when Tucker Carlson lost his channel on Fox, lost his show on Fox News. And the article was just appalling. It just talked about what a terrible person Tucker Carlson was, how right-wing, he's a right-wing racist, well, they didn't say racist, but he's a white supremacist, or how he would talk about white supremacist topics. There was no substance to it. There was no evidence. They didn't make any reference. There was no analysis. It wasn't journalism. It was just a pure smear, And then I was talking to one of my cousins about Tucker Carlson, and she comes back to me. She says, "Well, why are you listening to him? He's a white supremacist." Now, for those of you who don't know, I was born in Pakistan. I'm Muslim, Pakistani Muslim, brought up in Britain. And nowadays I count as a white supremacist. And I said to my cousin, I said, "Have you ever listened to any of his stuff?" And she goes, "No." So she just picked this up from the media, from the mainstream media. And The Guardian is a mainstream outlet. And I said, well, the great thing about Tucker Carlson is he'll have people that he doesn't agree with. He'll have left-wing dissenting voices like Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore, and I think he's had George Galloway on his channel, but people like that, and Tulsi Gabbard, and he'll have a discussion with them, a proper debate. So, it used to be like how mainstream media used to be, but it got changed. And yes, it's for money, but there's also something else because someone's interests are being served by altering the narrative, directing us all one way. And what it reminds me of is the smearing that was done in the Soviet Union, that was done may still be going on in China. It was certainly done during Mao's time and probably being done in North Korea and other repressive regimes where opponents are smeared as counter-revolutionaries because the establishment doesn't have any valid argument for what they're saying. So they just smear them, they rubbish them. And then I notice for myself as someone who is just distressed by the war in Ukraine, by the killing that's going on, and by how my country and other countries are just sending money and weaponry for the killing of people versus, hey, let's sit down and talk this out. Let's have a conversation. Let's negotiate peace. And anybody who objects to that, so the people that I know that I follow a little bit here and there who stand for peace, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, who was the opposition leader, and Donald Trump in the US, they just get smeared because they don't support the narrative that the powers that be or whatever, the establishment, they don't support that narrative. And the powers that be, they don't want us to listen to Trump, to listen to Corbyn, to listen to Orban. So Orban gets smeared as a fascist, as a racist, white supremacist. Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite. Donald Trump is this racist, white supremacist, lying criminal. So don't even bother listening to them. And all that does is it preserves the prevailing dominant narrative. And then alternative platforms which don't have censorship, like Odyssey, like Rumble, well, don't go to them because they're populated by conspiracy theorists. And that also, I think, plays into the whole censorship conversation.
No, it's really sad too, because like if there is like an actual event that needs to be talked about, you know, like say some politician actually gets caught and they actually catch them doing something, and there's facts, there's actual video, and it's within
Sorry,
their narrative.
like
Yeah.
Joe Biden being a pedophile.
Like, well, yeah, just like the topics about, you know, what happened over on the little island that they have, and you know, if something like that comes to light, then they'll just use some other topic to just, you know, like you were saying, smear, whether it's smearing or just to distract people. You know, they'll put some celebrity did something, and they'll just keep putting it on the news all day long just to get people distracted and not remember of what actual topics there are. And that's kind of what I was saying about, I blame the media a lot, is because that's what they do. You know, they'll like a favorite, like a celebrity or some athlete did something stupid. You know, they'll just keep putting that on there because there's some bill that just got passed that's not really good for the people, or some sort of thing that a politician got caught doing, or whatever. You know, and like they just always do that. And like to our points, people are lazy and they don't use technology for the right reasons, a lot of people. And sadly, there's just so many people in the world. You know, America has over 300 and like whatever 30 million. And one thing that I learned in my jobs and dealing with people in person and just in life, there's a lot of people that are just so naive. They're under a rock. I hate to say they're not intelligent, but I guess they aren't. And they like you said about the whole Tucker thing. You asked, I forget who you said it was, but you asked like, have you ever even listened to him? And they go, no. And it's so crazy I don't know how people live that sort of lifestyle, because like the way I grew up was completely different than what I believe in now. And I had to at one point in time just have enough of like the status quo and start asking myself questions and like doing the research. And then like I said, I'm a numbers person, so as long as you're going to bring up some sort of debate or point of view with anything political or whatever, it needs to be with actual facts. If you're saying someone did something, show me the video, show me the proof that that person said that. Like I got into it with my mother one time. She was like, "Oh, did you hear what this?" It was DeSantis. Did you hear what DeSantis said? And I was like, "What?" And then she started saying all this nonsense, right? And I was like, "Well, okay, show me the video of it. Him saying this, like, because he's a, you know, he's a high, you know, he's a person up high. He had to say this and actually have this on video because everything's videoed or audioed." And then she's like, she couldn't get it to me, and I'm like, all right, well then that's just nonsense. Like, don't talk to me about that. Now, if you say something and there's actual video of that person saying that or doing that, then yeah, I mean, I pretty much believe almost nothing now, and half of what I see. So you need to like, it has to be real transparent, or I'm on to the next. But sadly, most people aren't like that. They're just going to believe it immediately what that person had to say, or they heard something from someone else, and they just like that's it for them. You know, it's really sad. It really, really is.
You know,
Hoss, that's a really good point. I think
Jackie,
people
sorry,
don't
interrupt.
question.
I just want to just do a quick little reset here, just because I do want to get through at least one other topic before we move on. So everyone who's listening, we're having some fantastic conversation up here, but I would like, if we can, if you could drop down and give us a like and a retweet on the space. We haven't got very many likes and retweets on the space right now. I'd really appreciate if you just jump down to the chat section on this on the space. Give us a like, a retweet, and a comment if you want to. Also, we will be starting to bring up some public speakers in the near future. So we'll just prepare for that right now. If you would like to come up and speak with our panelists, you're more than welcome to just request to speak. We will have that dealt with by Cosmos Huss. He will bring you up and make sure you're not a bot, hopefully. And we will have a wonderful conversation with you when the time comes. So sorry, please. We have I completely agree. We have a real problem with people getting pigeonholed into these god awful algorithmically created pigeonholes. And we need people to have some sort of actual free discourse, which is personally why I think we need to start getting more social capital going onto chain rather than being censored by Web2 and by government institutions or any other entity that wishes to exert power over us. We need our social capital on chain and free, open, fair, and transparent. So sorry. What we'll do is Defund. I think you were going to speak next on this topic. If we could just get one more take from anyone else who wishes to go, and then we'll move on to the debt ceiling, the US debt ceiling. So please continue, whoever wishes to go first.
Yeah,
Wait, just very quick point. Oh, sorry. You go.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to be short and sweet. Pretty much propaganda it's been said since Roman times and before. It's just now today, it's hard to tell the difference between propaganda and facts. And the biggest reason for that is the spread of information is better than it's ever been. Back when propaganda was very prevalent in early Roman times and Greek times, and even in 1700s, 1800s, et cetera, you would just hear it from your newspapers and your word of mouth. And people wouldn't question the facts because that's kind of what you had to base on. Now you have an entire internet and billions of people on this internet that are sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, sharing opinions. So the spread of information is greater than ever. It also means propaganda can spread faster than ever. But I do think people are more informed than ever before. So that's why we're even asking these questions now versus back then. And that's really all I'm going to say about that.
Now that's great. So it is propaganda spreads a whole lot quicker, but then so does, I suppose, anti-propaganda or alternative perspectives, especially through censorship-resistant decentralized platforms. And then following on from what you said earlier, Hoss, I think it is that people just don't question, and they don't even think. It's worse than that they don't question. They don't even think to question, like a question is required. And I think a lot of that has to do with school. But then I would say that because my 18-year-old or my 15-year-old have never been to school. There you go.
Yeah,
and boy, do they ask a lot of questions.
that's good. I mean, that's what it's about, is asking questions. And I don't know when it just all changed, but yeah, people don't question anything anymore. They just, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to even be around people like that. I don't care what side. It's like you don't question things. You don't keep learning. And if you're going to use the word can't, like, you're just not going to be friends with Haas. Like, because if you're saying I can't do this, I can't do that, it's like, what do you mean you can't? Like, use technology. There's nothing you can't find on the computer. Maybe you watched the YouTube video of how to fix something. You still weren't able to do it. Then that's fine. At least you tried. But the whole narrative of people, and I guess it's sad. It's just people are lazy, and it is what it is. I mean, I don't know. I still have hope. I think Twitter doing this and trying to go in the right direction is a good starting point. Because like I've listened to some of your things on YouTube, and I mean, maybe I don't agree with all of it, but again, I'm more of a freedom act. So you're not promoting violence or anything. And for you to, like, put all that time in, thousands of hours into what you do, and then for some person that obviously there has to be someone that looks at it and they just, they're 100% on the other side of your viewpoint. And they're just like, all right, we had enough of this. Like, we're just going to click this button and pretty much ruin everything he's put into this. And I think it's really sad, to be honest with you. Like, even if that person doesn't agree with you, and I deal with people that don't agree with me on a lot of things, and that's completely fine. I'm not going to sit there and bully them or get rid of them. It is what it is. And I wish we can get back to, because I think most people in the world, like, if you want to use a soccer field or a football field or whatever you want to consider it, I think most people are kind of in the middle of the field. Maybe you're a little on the one side and the other side, but it's like they only want to promote someone that's like all the way on the other end of the field, and that's like who gets hurt, and then anyone else that questions it from the other perspective, they just get silenced. And it's like, what, like, and I kind of think what you were saying about what it's got to be more than just financials. And then, yeah, some people are probably doing it, but there's definitely a bigger play at, there's something bigger going on. It has to be, because it just doesn't make any sense. Like common sense and everything is just like out the window anymore. And and then, like, like any sort of issues, whether it's racial issues or whatever, and you can just look back at stats and statistics, and like, how could it how was it worse back in 1970 than it is now? Like, they're basically trying to say it's worse now than it was back then. It just makes no sense. Like, I'm from an area it was very diverse, and everyone was fine. And then now it's all of a sudden like that's all anyone talks about, especially every political cycle. That's all it's ever about, because they know that's an easy way to distract people and put people in them places. And then like if you're not that particular heritage or race or anything, you can't have any point of view to like anything because you're not that culture. You know, like that. Like I don't know when that started, but that makes no sense either. So I don't know. Whatever.
I think you're quite right, Horst, to be honest. And I think I'm pretty aligned with most of the people on the panel today on this subject. I think people, it's again, it's not about money; it's about power, and the people in power are simply taking advantage of the fact that it's easier to explain by saying that most people, in general, will be perfectly happy and perfectly sedate as long and not question anything, as long as they have a hot meal in front of them and you leave them alone. And just because that's such a low bar, you end up with governments able to just very quietly, and other entities besides governments, just very quietly separate us and into tribes. Pit us against each other, and then we forget everything that they're doing. So it's a dreadful thing. It's something that personally I believe that crypto, Web3, blockchain, whatever you want to call it, has some solution for, and something that we're trying to implement for, and hopefully we can overcome it. I really do.
We will.
I think so too, Rich. I think so too. So
don't you think that it actually has a lot of sense? Because what you're saying is absolutely correct. Most people desire a hot meal every evening, but most people actually are, let's say, on the very lower end of what they earn. So basically for them, it's not so much being able to be on top of the food chain in terms of people, but rather to really have food on the table. And whatever is presented to them because of their status, because of what they have achieved, unfortunately, is everything that they get and they got. And once they got it, it actually becomes the truth to them. And the more you push propaganda to them, the better they are and more inclined to be willing to understand it and believe it compared to more intelligent people. So controlling the masses is always possible, not only because you mentioned different countries. I come from a Soviet country. I'm in Eastern Europe, so basically we have been doing something similar to Russia up until 25, 30 years ago. And it has its perks, but it has its negativity. The negativity is that you actually have a one channel of information, and in channel of information is usually not the entire picture. It is whatever is needed to be heard by you. But the positive side of such a system is that you actually get much more of the people being in the middle level rather than in the lower end. And being more on the lower end is actually more about capitalist countries and governments trying to interact and intervene with people's mind on the masses side. At least this is my take on everything.
I think you're right in a strong way, man. I think it's like as you were saying, with one channel of information. I think that's something that like a lot of governments, a lot of Western governments covet about, like the Russian political system and all that kind of thing, is that they get to control the narrative and give their citizens some level of complete comfort in a nice bubble where they can a bubble in which they can live in comfort. And that's a very easy way to control people. It is. You make sure someone's comfortable, and you can easily keep them sedate and easy to control.
Yeah. And then, Kamiko, there are certain, from what you said, I can see the certain benefits from that sort of system. But in the long run, it's unsustainable because censorship kills creativity.
Completely.
And then you have a stultified society that's devoid of any ideas, and it just, like what happened with the Soviet Union.
I totally agree. This is true. On the flip side is that you actually get much more, let's say, production, much more sustained models if the model of communism is actually implemented in the way it is supposed to be implemented. Because usually the model itself, the idea itself of communism is to have everyone being in the common prosperity. Now the China is about common prosperity, right? Everyone being in the middle class, and they actually pretty much succeed in much better way compared to Western civilizations. And this is because it is allowed to have it. The problem is that if on top you have 10, 20, 30 people that are actually abusing that power, you get terrible results. But yes, creativity in this particular example is usually killed depending on who creates the creativity, and these are the 20 people on top. And if they are not too creative, there is no creativity. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, 20 people on top can't be as creative as an entire population.
Absolutely.
And this is where, and it's only short term, because at some point it will crumble because it just can't keep pace with developments elsewhere, and it just grows, the society grows stale. And what's missing, what I think was missing, say, with the Soviet Union and other similar setups, was where ordinary people had agency over their own lives. And that's the challenge. Because if people have agency, if people have a say, then I think they'll come up with much, much better solutions and ideas. But then that can't happen in an environment of censorship, but it can happen in an environment or in decentralized structures.
Bring it all on, Shane, baby. That's what I say. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with any of you, to be honest. It's a very interesting topic, and something that I'd love to go into on more depth even. But in fact, I would like to take this opportunity to reset the space and go on to our second topic and probably final topic. I think we're going to talk about CBDCs today, the XRP bringing in infrastructure for CBDCs. But I think we're just going to knock that one on the head, because I would really like to go for the debt ceiling. So we'll talk about that in a moment. For now, I would like to just take the opportunity to reset the space. Everyone who's listening, I very much thank you for coming in and listening to the show. You're listening to Into the Cyber State. This is the premier public broadcast of Galactica Network. If you'd like to learn more about us, please just check on the pinned link. That's up on the Jumbotron, if you want to call it that. And you'll find out a little bit more about what we're trying to do. If you can take a look at our speaker panel, give them a click, give them a follow on their profiles, see what they're talking about, see what they're doing. And make sure, if you could, please just jump down, take 2 seconds of your time, give this space a retweet and a like. That would be really appreciated. So also, we are going to be moving into a section of the show where we bring up public speakers. So if you would like to give your own take, then please just request to speak. You can click on the heart icon below, click on the big hand, and that will request to speak. Cosmos Hoss will bring you up if he feels like you're not a bot. We've had that before. So, yeah. We will.
I'd like to hear what the bot has to say.
Well, normally they just say some random expletives and then just disappear, I believe. Hoss hit them on the head with a hammer.
Yeah, he was making like weird sounds in there. I love it though, man. Some people are so funny. Like, you just spent this whole time listening, because the individual was in the space pretty much the whole entire time. And then, I requested to come up, and then he just started making sounds.
Some people just don't have too much time on their hands, really. Okay, guys. So I'd like to move on to the second topic of the space. We've been talking about media bias for anyone who's new in the space. We're now going to be moving on to the US debt ceiling. Obviously, it's a very important topic for everyone in the space right now. Currently completely unresolved, as far as I'm aware. I've been checking the news pretty regularly. So for anyone who doesn't know, the debt ceiling is pretty much just a legislative limit on the amount of national debt that can be incurred by the US Treasury. It's set by the US Congress. It's been raised, I think, 78 times, something like that, previously in the past 30 to 50 years. I'm not entirely sure exactly how over the time period. But essentially, it's the amount of debt that can be incurred by the state of the United States of America. And it's currently at 31 trillion, just over. and we're discussing the two prevailing parties in the US, the Democrats and Republicans, are discussing whether they can increase that debt limit and avoid a default. So, guys, what do you think on the prospect of the US either finding an agreement and moving forward, raising the debt limit, or defaulting on the debt? And what do you think the consequences of that will be on a global scale? Please, if you want to, if you're desperate to take a spit, have a take on this, please say so. Otherwise, I'll just go with whoever comes to mind, which will probably be Kamoka.
Sure, good. Well, the debt ceiling has, as you mentioned, been raised too many times, and maybe it's a fraction of what it has been happening for the past after the golden standard. So basically, every time the government has any problem, it either prints money and then increases the debt ceiling, or tries to decrease it for a very short period of time and then increase the money supply again. So it is a fraction of what the capitalist countries are trying to achieve, especially in the States, and it is a huge problem that would actually hit in 30 to 40 years, even more in terms of amount, because ultimately these are cash money that needs to be returned and it never gets returned. So you basically create more and more indebtedness for the future populations to live with. It's not that big of a deal whether you actually fail on this one, whether the states actually have also failed a couple of times, I think, on different debt ceilings. It all gets resolved with more debt ceilings at the end. So you either print and you increase, or you just stop it right there for a period of time, and to the money supply of the cash just stops for a little bit. So you basically balance it out. So I think it's not so much a short-term problem rather than a long-term one, because it creates future indebtedness for the generations to come.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's just passing the buck. I've always had a strange, like, I don't know how much history everyone in the space is aware of, but most fiat currencies fail. Like almost, like I think it's in the 90th percentile of fiat currencies, they fail. That average is like I think there's like a hyperlative kind of number that goes around that's about 27. 27-year average lifespan for a fiat currency. I believe that's actually completely incorrect because it takes into account certain currencies which hyperinflated very quickly. But the general result of a fiat currency is eventually hyperinflation and failure. Now, the US dollar, the Great British Pound, all the all the fiat currencies you know and love, they've been around for a very long time. They've been around a lot longer than 27 years for sure. But like, it's a strange feeling when you end up with such a massive debt on a country such as the US, and the Treasury fumbling around trying to figure out where to actually get money from what I can see in some of the news articles. And you just do wonder when the end of life for a fiat currency is, and yeah, when and how much pressure an economic system can actually take before it crumbles. Sorry, Rich, I think you were going to say something, or was it Defund?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure he has something to say too, but I know specifically with, yeah, he probably won't say after this. But with the US dollar in particular, a default is not necessarily the worst thing here, right? They've never quote defaulted, but they've changed from gold and silver back and forth. And I have a strong feeling that they may let this default, even if it's for a brief period of time, maybe a week to a month, just to deploy plans for a future CBDC, right? That's the next topic. But I do think that deployment of a future CBDC, whether or not it is a replacement of the actual US dollar or a separate alternative to the US dollar issued by the US, I do think that is a route that they're going to take. I've actually been studying a couple a couple of interesting projects out there building software directly for building a blockchain specifically for CBDCs. One in particular is called Venom Network. I called onto them the other day, and they're actually a Saudi Arabian funded initiative. And they're going to be building a CBDC, presumably for Saudi Arabia, probably backed by their oil reserves. So I can see with a strong level of conviction that the US would issue a CBDC upon failing to pass this debt ceiling, right? And what it would do is it would essentially be a catalyst for the next recession. We're extremely overdue, and you could even argue that we've never left the 2008 recession, right? Because they've really just been patching and issuing more dollars to fix this massive hole that was left. So we've never actually fully recovered from that recession, and that mini flash crash we had during COVID was not a real correction. And with the yield curve inverted for, what was it, 220 days now, 2 and 10 is just completely out of whack. I could definitely see a default happening as a bridge to a new means of transacting with the rest of the world. If that makes any sense. I hope that wasn't just a bunch of rambling, but if that makes any sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me, mate. Sorry, Rich, I think you did have a point as well.
Yeah, I want the US to default. I think they may for a short period, as they iron it out, but they've always, in the end, ended up raising the limit. And why I want them to default is because then they would not have this fraudulent money, this fiat currency that would fund their crazy climate change agenda. Carbon dioxide, by the way, I just want to get this in, is plant food. You have carbon dioxide, warmth, and water vapor in the presence of daylight. That's photosynthesis. And then also that they're not going to be able to fund the killing of people in Europe, that they'd be able to, they'd have to lobby for peace.
So you're a believer that if the US dollar did collapse, it would eventually lead to world peace? That's kind of what you're assuming here.
No. Thanks for asking that. No, I'm not making myself clear. I don't think the US dollar is going to collapse for a whole other reasons, right? Not imminently anyway. But I think but I do want them to default, if only for a while. And I want the Republicans to be able to reduce the budget significantly so that Biden can't keep spending money on climate change boondoggles that are just going to impoverish people further. They can't keep funding the war in Ukraine, so they have to sit down and lobby for peace because they don't have the money for that anymore. But I think in the end they will pony up and print some more. And Kamoka, I think it was you that said, or perhaps it was Galactica, about the fiat currencies. So when I was learning about money in gold and silver, and before I discovered Bitcoin, what I learned was there's been over 3,500 fiat currencies. Every single one has collapsed. Every single one. It's only a matter of time. The pound will collapse. The euro will collapse, because governments cannot resist the temptation of just printing more and more and more. I mean, if we could print, if I had a magic Bitcoin machine that would just print more Bitcoin, well, would I resist that temptation? Unlikely.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure most entities who had that ability would end up succumbing to that temptation.
Yeah.
But I must say, I think, Rich, maybe that's a bit of a narrow take on how the effect of a default would occur and what the impacts of it.
Yes,
I do understand.
I agree. It is a narrow take.
I do understand your general idea in that it would perhaps force a reduction in the size and maybe of US debt, of general US spending, and maybe make the US more efficient. Is that perhaps more general?
I don't know about more efficient, but it would mean that they wouldn't be able. They'd have to really. When you think about it, right? As a household, if I have to cut my expenditure because I can't afford the repayments on the credit card debt, or I need more money to pay that off, can't keep raising it, the credit card company won't give me another increase, then I do have to cut my spending. And then what I have to do, pay attention to, give priority to, are the basics. Now, I've heard talk that what the Democrats might do is invoke Amendment 14, the 14th Amendment, which I don't fully understand, but the Democrats may claim that it gives Joe Biden the power to set the budget, that he can just create extra funding if need be. And I think that would create even more of a schism within the body politic in the United States.
So for anyone who's not aware, what Rich was referring to there, the 14th Amendment, I believe that's, and the controversy around kind of using it in this context is kind of about the fact that it's based on wording, really. So some people kind of interpret this to mean that the US can't default on its debt, technically, right? But this is very much up in the air legally, whether they can actually do that. And even more up in the air is whether any other country would even care about them implementing this. Sorry, anyone else who wants to put in, please do. Obviously, we have some Americans on here who have a lot more information on this than I do.
Yeah, personally, I was going to say, I don't know how the 14th Amendment even goes to what they're trying to do, because like that had to deal with, it was ratified back in like 1868 or 66 or whatever, and it had to deal with Confederate states in the South. They weren't able to pay for slaves anymore. Like they weren't able to do that. So I don't know how that amendment has anything to do with the current status of things. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Like I don't know. Like,
but Hoss, a lot of what the Biden administration is doing, similar to what the European and many other Anglo nations are doing, doesn't make any sense. That we're spending money to send weaponry to Ukraine versus looking after our own, that the southern border is open, that and it's also happening in Ireland and in Britain. We're having large influxes of illegal immigrants. That doesn't make sense. That the Conservative government in Britain, which is traditionally a government for small business, for family, for church, isn't doing anything to promote business. Its policies are statist. So a lot of what's been going on in the last few years or so doesn't make sense inside, I suppose, what we've known previously in terms of politics and how governments are run. It doesn't make sense that the 15-minute cities that are being imposed, that are being rolled out in Australia, in parts of the United States, they're bringing them in Britain. I think they might be doing them in Ireland. It doesn't make sense for the Dutch government to say, okay, in order to save the climate, we're going to stop farmers from farming. What? You're going to stop, in order to save people, you're going to deny them the ability to grow more food? And instead, you're going to still keep sending weapons over to Ukraine? What about the environmental consequences of war? So a lot of this doesn't make sense from a conventional point of view, but then we're not dealing with conventional times. We are at, I think, at the cusp of a currency collapse and at the cusp of the death of Western hegemony.
It's possible. Yeah, there's a non-zero chance. I must admit, there is a non-zero chance. I will say, I mean, if you take a more broad view of how current government is not the top tier of control right now, you can see there is some sense. So right now, obviously, you have your government, whether you're in the US or the UK. You have your government who is there to help society implement what it wants to implement. Takes your taxes and implements what you want to implement, ostensibly anyway. But unfortunately, right now, those governments are currently being coerced, nudged, influenced, whatever you want to call it, by organizations such as the World Economic Forum, the Financial Action Task Force, and various other acronyms, who exert their influence over our governments. These bodies are clearly completely unelected. They are not for the people. They are for their agenda. These are people who are, they have representatives from governments, but they also have representatives who are simply business leaders, in quotes, and other more powerful people who want to push their agenda onto the entire planet, onto the whole human species, not just one single country. So when you take it in that kind of context, you can see why certain governments have pivoted quite massively, and certain groups of people within government have pivoted massively in order to enforce an agenda which is being enforced upon them. It's a very, very scary time as far as governance goes, in my opinion. This is obviously not Galactica's opinion, this is my personal opinion. But as far as Galactica does go, this is why we believe that it's not just the financial rails that we need to create, it's the social rails of humanity that we need to create. Inclusive social rails that are transparent and for everyone, so that everyone can see what is going on chain in an immutable manner. Because we need solid meritocratic governance, and it's something that's absolutely desperately needed, and we need it fast. So yeah, that's my little take on it. Does anyone else have a take on this one? I've just been reading up on the 14th Amendment. I can read it out very quickly. It's very short. It says as follows: the validity of public debt in the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. So there you go. That's it. Whether that, I don't personally see how that really is a legal precedent for not paying your debt.
Well, you had the January the 6th walkabout, where people walked about the Capitol building, where they were let in by the security forces. It's just insane. And just by your accent, Galactica, John, is it right? I take it you're in the UK. I've been on demonstrations outside of Houses of Parliament many a time. There's no way you can get in. I've driven past the parliamentary buildings in Islamabad, in Pakistan. They are so well fortified. And on that day, when the government knew there was going to be a demonstration, they had such little security. Well, no, what they had was an insurrection. People without any weapons or anything, or any organization or any proposals and stuff. So perhaps that's the insurrection that will justify the invoking the 14th Amendment.
Perhaps, who knows how these how the powers would be want to direct you. You don't know, do you? Okay, guys. What I would like to do right now, we've obviously gone on quite a bit on both the US debt ceiling and previously on media bias. We have one more topic if you would like. We also would like to invite anyone who's in the listeners right now to jump up and speak if you have anything to say on any of the topics that we brought up. Also, if you could just jump down and give us a like and a retweet if you haven't already, we'd really appreciate it. There's been some really good conversation going on today, and the more people who hear it, the better, and the better educated will be, just as we've been discussing on media bias. It's always best if you just, even if you don't agree with a topic, if you don't agree with a take, just listen to it anyway. Far too few people just take the time to listen to the other side, and it's always good to just promote genuine, humble, correct discourse. Just always give your opponent in a debate or in life in general the opportunity to speak. It just enriches you and it enriches them. If you don't come to an agreement, you don't come to an agreement. That's it. Okay, guys. Would anyone like to? Does anyone else have another take on the US debt ceiling? Do you know if, for instance, do you think it will have a large global effect?
Yeah, it will. Absolutely. I mean, whatever decision is made will define what happens in the next however many years. I mean, I briefly mentioned the inverted yield curve, but we're heading towards a recession. Every 2 and 10 year yield curve inversion has led to a recession since I think ever. or at least since 1969. So there will be a recession. It's whether or not this default in the US dollar is the catalyst to cause the recession or not, right? Because there needs to be a catalyst. These things don't just happen naturally.
The US has technically been in a recession, like from a technical sense, for some time, correct? It's just
correct.
basically
Yeah,
we
but
are
it's not. Yeah, let me rephrase that. It's not. It's leading towards a more of a depression, right? When you look at the actual fundamentals across multiple industries and the overvaluation of the stock market, which I don't even touch anymore, and the housing market, and all these different little asset classes that make up the overall GDP of the U.S. and overall world economy, it's not great. So there needs to be a correction where corrections usually end up, they're terrible in the short term for anybody that's a normal person, but in the long term, it leads to prosperous growth of a nation. So we will find out what the catalyst is and how bad this actually is. But I do think whatever happens with the debt ceiling will have some bearing on that. So say they do raise the debt ceiling, they'll probably just print more cash and do their best to pretend like a recession is not happening, pretend like a depression won't happen. They're going to print a lot more money to try and fund more initiatives to delay the inevitable, right? That's what they've been doing for years now. If they don't pass it and there is a default, there is a chance that they don't pass it and there isn't a default. But say they don't pass it and there is a default, that would most likely be a catalyst towards a recession. And that would affect the world because every U.S. recession does in turn affect the entire world economy. So it's interesting to see what they actually do and whether or not they feel that a recession is reasonable for them to deal with, and who wants to take the blame and who wants to get elected as a result, because that's really what is at the end of the day for these people. Who wants to get elected for what reasons?
Of course, at the end of the day, it's always about power, isn't it? Sorry, Richard, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually haven't thought about this, like what would happen if there is a default. One is I think it'll be a short-term one, like Defund suggested, because they will come up with something. I think Britain and Europe are in a much worse state than the US.
I would agree.
And I think what's likely to happen with the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates and indicating they're going to keep doing that, then capital is going to keep leaving Europe and Britain and going to where the interest rates are higher, which will strengthen the dollar.
What do you think, Kamal, as a resident of Eastern Europe? Perhaps you have a take on what you think will occur in that area of the world compared to the US. What do you think the effect will be there? Do you think you'll end up worse off than the US or better?
Well, it's a two-way answer, because usually Europe, not usually, but in the past 50 years, usually the countries within Europe are service countries, meaning that they have only services. We don't have production. By not having production, you're actually very much dependent on what others are doing in order for you to import. And it is extremely bad situation when prices and inflation is increasing, because you are actually not producing, you're getting more services that are more expensive. You actually need to cover those by more labor, which is impossible to do. So I believe in the times of crisis, when Europe is usually worse off compared to the States or the UK. UK is also somewhere around the services rather than production. So in that sense, the euro has and will suffer a little bit more compared to the US dollars. I think the US dollar would be able and will decrease in value due to other factors, because there is a very high initiative to turn away from doing only transactions in US dollars. For example, we've seen that with oil. We see the pack that is turning around Turkey, China, and India, and even the Arabs, which could turn out to be a very exciting times for all the other currencies rather than the dollar. So The debt ceiling doesn't play the only role. The problem here, if it's failed and it's gone down the road, is that it would turn out to be another catalyst towards the dollar being denominated.
You know, and one thing that is going to be interesting is how's Bitcoin going to be affected by all this, right? You know, say there is a default, does that help Bitcoin? Does that help the crypto market as a whole? You know, there's a lot of people arguing out there that say the world does go through another crisis, people might start parking a lot of cash into Bitcoin. But what does that mean for the rest of the industry, right? People might just be parking cash into Bitcoin and that's it. And you might find it might be Armageddon for the less used protocols and projects in crypto. They may also find an amazing surge in volume and TVL and all these amazing things that are driving, you know, overall adoption in the space. But you may see short term almost an Armageddon. But I do think it could potentially be a spur for long term cryptocurrency adoption during this next cycle. I am very curious to hear what you guys think about that.
I agree personally. Yeah, if obviously if fiat gets weaker, then personally I think crypto will get stronger. Obviously, it will start with Bitcoin being the store of value. That will probably be the first to be adopted in a situation where fiat no longer holds relevance. But then obviously the rest of crypto, the actual financial rails, the other layer ones, will take a massive amount of relevance because obviously Bitcoin can't scale in the same way as a lot of these as a lot of other L1s, including ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I think for adoption it would be absolutely enormous. It would take a little time, as you say. There would be a shock moment, but yes, for adoption, I agree. Does anyone else have a particular take on that one? Because I'm just thinking about simmering down and just slowly closing off the space. So.
Good, Rich.
Okay, I think Bitcoin will play the role of a safe haven asset. It's just seen on Zero Hedge. There's an article: debt ceiling doubts finally weigh on stocks, bonds, and gold bid. So gold is at close to, if not already over $2,000, and it hasn't been like that ever, staying above $2,000 because it's a safe haven asset. But it's not as accessible or as easy to get for people as, say, Bitcoin. Okay, there's a little bit of a learning curve for people to get into Bitcoin, but it's not as expensive because you can just buy a little bit of it. So I think money will move into Bitcoin. It's because it's way more transportable. And I think in Europe, there has been flights to Bitcoin over the last few months or so as the interest rates keep going up. And then I think if that money coming into Bitcoin will also positively affect the rest of the market. But this may just also be hopeful thinking on my part as well, because I'm not a Bitcoin maxi.
Well, I mean, I really do agree with you on the fact that it's more transportable and more accessible. Now, obviously, a lot of people will jump to gold and say that they own gold, when in fact they have absolutely zero access to any vault that gold may be in, and they never will have access to the gold that they actually own. So essentially, what you actually own is an entry on a database. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have self-sovereign custody, which is a very, very important thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you're in America, more people will buy more guns and ammo.
Yeah.
No, but like for Bitcoin, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think people, I mean, realistically, there's really no other options besides other cryptos, but it is an easier place for people to get in. Like even, there's Bitcoin ATMs like all over the place, and people could just put their money in there and get Bitcoin. And the only concern I ever have with Bitcoin is like it's always this like, hey, it's a hard asset and they're never going to make more of it. Eventually, in theory, they would have to, because what would be the incentive to mine Bitcoin once it's out? So I think eventually it would have to be, some sort of inflation. It may be small, but there has to be something, because like I don't know. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking about all these tokenomics that have like really deflationary mechanisms. Like if you look at like Ethereum, like they have a mechanism that's burning, and it technically is deflationary. Same thing with like BNB, but like Bitcoin, there has to be something eventually, for people to keep the network up and running. Like that's the only thing. But I think that would be fixed somehow. But there would have to be some sort of incentive to because it's not cheap. These people that have like these really big infrastructures to mine Bitcoin, they have bills. So I don't know. Like that's the only thing I ever get concerned about, because like the whole amount of Bitcoin is pretty much almost out now, like the next halving and all that. And I think they estimated like the current market cap, and maybe it's like $34 billion worth of Bitcoin that could be mined or whatever it was. But that runs up sooner or later. But totally.
No, what you're saying there is an interesting point. The infrastructure is not cheap, and it's only going to get more expensive. And there's no more Bitcoin after a certain point being issued, right? Just like there's only a certain amount of gold in the world, even though we're still finding more. That underlying infrastructure, say Bitcoin does reach a level of general adoption where it's used in everyday life by a lot of people, you may see governments picking up that infrastructure, and that kind of removes a little bit of that ethos of Bitcoin, right? I could actually see Bitcoin turning into a more centralized thing versus these decentralized hard money. So I could see that happening down the line. I'm very curious what you guys think about that. But I do think that you could see that happening down the line where governments will actually pick up that level of infrastructure.
Yeah, there has to be something. I mean, it's not sustainable. Just like I said, the infrastructure is so expensive, and there just has to be incentive, because no one's going to just do it for the good of it. Like, oh, let me just mine Bitcoin for no reason, or run nodes with no incentive to do it. Like there'd have to be some sort of incentivization to do that. But no, like that was just my last thought about everything. But I totally agree. Like there's no other really safe havens. I think things that you can barter with would always be valuable. Like in the States, having ammunition and guns and like other things that you can trade would always be kind of valuable. But other than that, like, yeah, Bitcoin for sure.
And I'm sure it'll be something else in the future. Let's not forget how much tulip bulbs used to be worth, right? So something's only worth as much people will pay for it. So if it's not Bitcoin, it'll be something else in the future. But I do see Bitcoin taking the foothold.
Yeah, well, we have to consider that, Satoshi Nakamoto and the team behind Bitcoin, they didn't have they're not prophets. They didn't take into account everything. There's no, this is why they built in governance mechanisms, because otherwise it just would not be adaptable. So we just have to hope that through governance, the Bitcoin survives. We are Galactica Network. We are 100% focusing on governance, on a meritocratic governance, decentralized governance system, for that very reason, because we want to be a long-term protocol that is adaptable, very quickly adaptable to whatever circumstances come up by our community. And that's an important premise for any blockchain or any project building in the space. Right, guys. I think what we're going to do, I think we're just going to wind down. Cosmos Hos, Defund, Kamoka, absolutely wonderful to meet our new guests, and obviously beyond the space with Hos again. Love you, brother. So I think what we'll do is
don't forget Rich. Rich got rugged or something, but he hopped back on.
Yeah. I just saw Rich left. And Crypto Rich, absolutely wonderful hearing those takes. He's obviously got some very clear and very passionate viewpoints. It's fantastic. Like I say, as we spoke about earlier in the space, regardless of whether you agree with a viewpoint, listen to it. It's very, very important that you listen to it and learn from it. So on that note, what we'll say is, guys, if you would like to promote any particular project or any particular website you would like to promote as a speaker, please do. I'm just going to invite Crypto Rich up again, just so he can do that. Defund, if you would like to maybe just do a little shill of your project, and we'll start moving on.
For sure, yep. So once again, the blockchain for creating financial products. We're actually running a testnet mission on Say with a bunch of other projects: SparrowSwap, Kryptonite, Block Protocol, Stride, a bunch of really cool people. We've got this really cool new token out under the moniker SLSTI. It's a liquid staked index fund with stake Say, staked Atom, staked Osmosis. It's a really cool new product that's out there, and it's just really a test to show, you know, what we're really capable of providing value to for exchanges, builders, and investors at the end of the day. So yeah, feel free to check that out. It's on our Twitter page at Defund_finance. You can come check that out there if you'd like.
Absolutely, everyone, please check the Defund profile and check any links. And absolutely wonderful having you up, mate. Crypto Rich, would you like to show anything you wish to show?
Well, listen, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm sorry, I just lost signal. I don't know what happened. I had to restart my mobile phone to get back on. Glad I got back on in time just to say goodbye. And for Defund and Komoka and Galactica, I'd love to have you on my channel. If you want to come on and talk about your projects, just send me a DM via Twitter. We can set something up. And again, Hoss, thank you so much for inviting me. And if you have any projects that you want to invite onto my channel, Hoss, please get in touch, because I still do cover crypto. And if people are interested in finding out crypto, I do a lot about, in particular, some privacy projects. I'm one of the crew at Pirate Chain. I'm a first mate on the good ship Pirate Chain, which is more secure, more private than Monero. And the website is pirate.black. I'm also very closely connected to Secret Network, so I cover a lot of stuff with Secret Network and that ecosystem. And of course, the Osmosis DEX, which is just absolutely wonderful. And I cover politics, current affairs. And if you're listening to this and you find my commentary interesting, then please do come along. And the best way is bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. And please do follow me on Twitter. Thank you.
Rich, man, it's been fantastic having you up. Really is. And yeah, just click on the profiles. Just check out the stuff our speakers have got, guys. Komoka, absolutely amazing having you up, dude. Please, if you have anything you wish to say, go for it.
No, it was a real pleasure indeed.
Wonderful. Well, in that case, if you would like to find out more about Komoka and their work, please check out Nolus. If you check out the Nolus profile, that'll be where you want to go. Okay, guys. Well, this has been another amazing space. We've had some incredible takes, some great insights from our speakers. I'd like to just say thank you to our panel and our listeners. Check the pinned tweet to find out what we are building. Galactica Network is building. And check out the website. You can find the sign up for the newsletter at the very bottom of the website. You want to sign up for that, you will be getting some very interesting news very soon. And as I say, we're in very early development. But if you start joining us now and join us on our Discord, you will be in at the very ground floor on what we're building. Hopefully it's going to be something special. So don't forget to drop a like and a retweet on the space. That still helps us. Even if you do it now at the end of the space, it really helps. It gets more people to watch the recording. And thank you for joining us, everyone. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Into the Cypher State. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. See you soon.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.